Okay. Well, we might as well get started if that's all right. So, welcome everybody. I think we've got some people observing. I think, Julie, can you just remind us who they are?
Yeah, we've got Sonia Batchelor, our new NED, who'll start on the 1st of June, and we've got Sue Whelan-Tracy observing the meeting, and Dan Badham, Deputy Director of Nursing, is also observing the meeting.
Excellent. Welcome to you all. Any public questions?
No public questions, and apologies from Alex, and Jane is deputising.
Okay, and I think it's our Medical Director, Tolu's first public meeting, I think, Tolu, so welcome to the public meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, let's get started. Any apologies, Julie?
Just Alex Guild.
Okay, thanks very much. Declarations of any other business for the meeting? Declarations of personal interest? Minutes of the meeting of the 11th of March. Any corrections, please? No? Okay. The action log of matters arising. Everyone happy that they've all been done or, scheduled? Okie doke. In which case, we'll move on to the quality section and the board story. So bladder and bowel continence services. Debbie, did you just want to introduce the subject?
Yeah, sure. So Ellie's come to give us some insights into the service, but also a case study. We'd had a few concerns, well, back end of last calendar year when we changed products. So I thought it'd be quite helpful for Ellie to come along and talk about that and some of the positive outcomes that we've had now that that's a bit more embedded. So I'm going to hand over to Ellie, be able to introduce herself and her story.
Welcome, Ellie. Over to you.
Hello, thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm probably one of the smaller services that you aren't really aware of, so hopefully this will enlighten you of what we do. I'll just share with you and just bear with me.
Excellent.
So you can see that hopefully,
Yes.
and then I can see that hopefully. Right, I can't see any of you, so you're please someone speak up if you need to. I'm only on two screens, so please let me know if anyone wants to ask any questions during, but I suggest we ask at the end if need be. So yes, my name is Ellie Rimmer. I'm the bladder and bowel service lead and pelvic health physiotherapist. I'm going to talk to you about the recent brand transition that we've gone through. So before I go on to the transition, which I will be talking about, I just want to tell you a bit about our team, really. We're a very small team and I'm extremely passionate member, really, of our bladder and bowel service and a huge advocate for prevention and treatment for bladder and bowel dysfunctions. Often these are very treatable conditions, but as many people find it embarrassing and a taboo to discuss, can be a barrier to treatment, but once they gain support, we get very good outcomes and patient feedback. So 1 in 3 women have urinary incontinence. And when I took on this role, I truly believed as a pelvic health physiotherapist, we can have a great impact on quality of life within the community. So our team is made up of a number of different paediatric and adult specialist nurses, as well as another pelvic health physiotherapist, some nursery nurses, a continence assessor, as well as an admin team. So as you can see from this slide, we actually have 3 arms to our service. Initially, I'm going to talk about the clinic arm, and that's a classic NHS outpatient service that we're able to see anybody from age 5 to 100 plus to support anything from nighttime wetting with a child to postnatal issues with a new mum as a result of birth trauma to postmenopausal women with stress and urge incontinence, men post-prostatectomy surgery to the older population with functional issues due to cognitive impairment. So that's our first arm. Our second arm really is our home delivery service, which obviously today we'll be talking more in depth. And this home delivery service is for clients that are receiving containment products, a formal name, but most people will know them as PADs. The patients are unable to improve with their symptoms with medical or surgical or conservative management, and therefore they're deemed to be able to have these on the NHS. They can be added by the community nurses or by our specialist nurses. And we have approximately 4,900 patients currently on our service for these products. Ideally, these would all have an annual review, but as you can imagine, along with many other services, these annual reviews are not achieved, and that's due to capacity. So any issues that do arise as a result of their prescription, we address on a firefighting basis as a result of that. Finally, you can see our prescription arm, and that's an inbound call centre concept, really, that's for patients that are receiving catheters or catheter-related products. These are prescribed items, so they need to contact us monthly or bi-monthly, and then we process their order, and this is managed by an external dispensary appliance centre, a very big warehouse pharmacy, basically. Our team writes all these prescriptions for these patients, and if they're having any issues related to their catheters or UTIs or other issues like that, we support them directly with their needs alongside the community nurses. So to access our service, we accept GP and other HCP consultant referrals via the hub, and they'll be triaged to see the necessary team. We have clinics all the way across Berkshire, from Hungerford all the way in the west to Slough all the way in the east, and lots of other places in between. So as this is a very busy slide, I'm not going to read it all, but this gives you an idea of the type of things that we can treat. And as I'm sure many of you believe, oh, what we do is pads. This is not what we do. So we will support anybody with stress urinary incontinence, urge, prolapse issues, constipation or difficulty emptying their bowel, pain. So that would include pain with intercourse, dyspareunia, as well as perineal, scar tissue advice, fecal incontinence, as the list goes on and on. So a number of different treatments that we can offer. Again, you can see this on this slide. We have everything from simple pelvic floor exercises. It will be fluid dietary advice on strengthening, functional exercises. We have a multitude of devices we can provide to improve pelvic floor function, bowel function, etc., as well as support with teaching with a number of different adjuncts such as anal irrigation or intermittent catheterization. And finally, if none of this works, we do have the ability to provide people with pads. So, as you understand, we had a product changeover, and that's what I'm going to primarily speak to you now about. So we moved from one brand to another, and we've been using that previous brand for over 20 years. So as you can imagine, many of those patients with long-term needs have been very embedded with the use of that particular brand. The implementation was over 3 months, and that was due to a delivery cycle, although it took a few more months for things to really settle. So from really the end of May to late October, we were addressing issues as they came up. So prior to the transition, many of the care homes were given training, and that was by the brand nurses themselves. We supported the community nurses with training on the particular new products that were coming out. There was internal communications that were provided. We obviously updated the Nexus page, and the NHS supply chain who send out these products obviously gave notice to the patients about the implementation that was going to be happening. As a result, it was sort of considered that we would probably need a bit more admin support. So we did have another admin that was able to help us with this transition. We were also able to send out samples, and the brand nurse themselves also were able to support us. So that's what was put in place beforehand. As the transition happened, we had a huge number of calls per day, and it was somewhat unexpected, to be quite honest. And really that number was uncalculatable, and we just lost track very quickly of how many we were getting. But just to give you an indication of emails that we received normally per month for this particular service, the home delivery service, we'd receive about 280 a month, and it ramped up to managing about 2,000 a month. So we quickly realised that we needed to potentially do physical reviews. That became very quickly apparent, and we developed a new process and created some frequently asked questions that were able to support the admin team so they knew what to give to the patient as they rang up. We also developed an action log to be able to monitor and support patients as they went through their transition. Now, patients were obviously anxious about the transition. A lot of it was related to change, but they were also having issues as the products weren't working, and it was resulting in leakages and bed changes, clothes changes, etc. So we were trying to help with those. So the critical elements that we really began to realised we needed to understand was what was their fluid intake per day, what was their pad usage per day, what their waste measurement was, and what the care knowledge of the actual product itself was. Although you may think all these products are the same, they really aren't, and they are shaped differently and they are made differently. So this particular brand that we're now using has what's called sort of anti-leak cuffs, so they just sort of sit inside, and really the sort of cupping and shaping was really integral to that. So these questions were asked by the admin team, and then we could implement the next stage on from them and help them as needed. So the other things that we quickly needed to implement was further support with the community nurses, because they were obviously being asked questions about from the carers and the patients in terms of them being them struggling. So we cascaded all that key information to them as well. We shared various fitting guides that were available, on YouTube, etc., to be able to support them. We also supported the care home support team directly, so that they could, gain our advice and help them with the care homes as well. So we implemented a standard process to follow, so that we knew that we were managing everyone as best we could. So to move on to our case study that I just want to talk about, it is a brief case study, but this is to give you an example of how we went about trying to help those people that weren't responding. As I say, there's a standard alignment that the NHS supply chain that is done for all products. There's like a standard product transition across. We followed this, and obviously the NHS supply chain put everybody from one product onto that standard alignment onto the next. But many of these patients had not had a review for many, many years, and they were not necessarily on the right product for them. And this is a good example of that. Okay. So the young female was age 25. She had learning disabilities and was immobile. Family contacted us due to leakage and using more than the products that she was supplied with. She was completely urinary and fecal incontinent. And she was currently on a medium size, and that's what she was on before, and she was transitioned over to the same size medium. And that was what the standard alignment was. The patient was leaking frequently day and night, and we therefore gave her a home visit. We asked them to complete a fluid volume chart, obviously measured her waste, and identified that she was on having 2,300 mils per day via a PEG feed. So with this information, we actually moved her onto a small size. And as I say, the sizing is not the same, which I'll talk about in a minute. And really that size fit her quite well. And we upped her onto a slightly higher absorbency. And as a result of that, we reviewed her with a telephone review, and she was much better in the day, but she was still having issues at night. And therefore we upped her absorbency onto the next level for the nighttime. And that product worked for her. So that was a good resolution, really. So the best way I can describe it was that the previous brand was a bit like wearing a pair of trackies, really. It was quite forgiving in size and would fit many different shapes and gusset regions and leg sizes, thigh sizes, etc. Yet the new brand was a bit more like a tailored approach. It really needed to be a bit more like a pair of jeans. You needed to know, the length of the leg. Clearly, I'm exaggerating here, but it was a bit more sort of precise in its measurement and fit. So we really needed to make sure that we were identifying all those different needs for those patients. It felt initially quite difficult to monitor how many patients we had adjusted, as we were just firefighting with all of those patients that were coming in. But we estimate approximately a third of those patients on our service were reviewed at some point during that transition process. And as you can imagine, that did have an impact on our clinic's waiting list specifically. Thankfully, once we got going with things, we got some lovely feedback, and I have just added a few comments that we've had that we sort of got during the sort of October, November period, once we'd got settled into knowing what we were really doing with this new product. So I'm not going to read those out to you, but it was lovely to receive. As you can see, I just wanted to say I was very impressed with your same-day response to my complaint and your immediate investigation. So it was nice to be able to address some of those things. So from a further learning perspective, we've now implemented a review programme for all of our care home patients. Obviously, they are still small numbers. There's only 800 of those patients on our service, but those are sort of, we can manage those a little bit easier because you can see quite a number in one location in one time. So we're slowly working through those. We've also implemented a transition pathway to ensure that children are moved over into the adult service once they're age 18, and they will always have a review with those. So again, we've put that into place subsequently. We're looking to see how AI can help us in developing a better review system as well. And we're also taking our Health Bus out with the view to supporting continence promotion. And that's it from me. Has anyone got any questions?
Ellie, thanks very much indeed. I think if you can share your screen, that'd be very helpful. Thank you. Julian.
Ellie, good morning. Thanks for that.
Morning.
That was really helpful, because in the midst of all that, I did get some complaints, which obviously signed off. So it's quite nice to see what that's about. I suppose just being really direct, did we instigate this change as a sort of cost-saving exercise? Because what you're saying is actually these have actually worked out, these new products have worked out well in the end after doing all these things. But was it, because I think that was the suggestion, we were sort of penny pinching?
I think it's probably a question to ask Tim Shannon, to be quite honest, of why the product transition happened. I probably would direct you towards him, if that's okay.
Okay, no, Sally.
Hi, Sally, sorry, you're mute.
Apologies, question of the line on mute. Ellie, can I ask you what the distribution of your caseload would be? Would it be predominantly elderly with a few postnatal or children?
Oh my goodness, it's very difficult to actually quantify that, because somebody did ask, we did get asked for some information about those patients with learning disability. Now there's no box on, we use a completely different database to Rio, and that's the database that we have, and there's no box, there isn't a box on Rio either, to be quite honest, in terms of that ticks the information to be able to gain that sort of span of patients. And we honestly don't know. In terms of the type of patients that the community nurses add on, they will be often patients that are end of life, that are sort of, you know, bed bound, that might be having had a stroke, that are really end of life, that are not going to obviously improve with any other sort of conservative medical management, etc. The patients that my team put on, they may well be younger women that don't want to necessarily have surgery, so they might be sort of 60s, 70s, they've gone through all the different options in terms of surgical options, and they've really deemed that this isn't necessary, but they trigger into the sort of need, or maybe their surgery's failed for whatever reason, and now they're needing a smaller product, just a more simple device, but they trigger the sort of NHS qualification for that. Right. So anything and everything, but there isn't really, we don't really know, I'll be totally frank.
No, that's interesting. But a lot of it, I'm assuming, that could be carried out by the children's nurses or the district nurses, and then at some stage they might then refer to you.
So the community, from a paediatric perspective, anyone that's added on is definitely done by our service. So all children are offered the full opportunity to try and gain full continence as early as possible. And we have nursery nurses that basically deliver toilet training workshops, and that's done within our team, with the view to prevent, because dare I say 20 years ago, it was standard practice to put these children automatically on these products, and they'll be on these products for life. Yeah. So that we've actually in the last 5 years changed practice quite considerably to basically give a more tailored approach to optimise as many children as possible to go on that service. In terms of the number of 18s, there is only 450 on our service, to give you a rough estimation in terms of the numbers. But obviously many children with learning disabilities will have gone into adults, and they would have continued on, and we don't know those figures as a breakdown.
Right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Sally. Naomi.
Yeah, thanks, Ellie. I'm just really curious about what, in your opinion, in advance of the change, what, in your opinion, was intended to be the sort of benefit, the value add here for the patient, or our patients. Clearly, there were many of them. And did you give any thought ahead of the implementation to what might go wrong, you know, and if you think there was intended to be a benefit, has it delivered?
So I'll be honest, I took over the service just prior to this implementation, and therefore my involvement was sort of at the point of cliff, if that makes sense. Prior to then, I was actually only doing 9 hours within the trust.
Okay.
I worked privately, so my knowledge was limited. There was some degree of product selection, and again, I think I'm going to direct towards Debbie to be able to answer, because it was
Okay.
somewhat out of our
That's
hands,
fair.
if that makes
That's
sense.
fair.
That's fine. Debbie, you can answer the questions.
Yeah, I mean, it was about efficiencies and ensuring we had a sensible product that wasn't of a platinum standard, but actually met need. The you know, this is an ever growing demand, like many other things in the NHS, and we've got to look at what works and we can use, but actually is also cost efficient, to make sure we can achieve as many people as possible having these products that work for them. We were probably quite out of kilter with with a lot of other NHS organisations in continuing to provide what was a very, very high spec, if you like, and
Okay.
less cost efficient product. So it went through all of our usual tendering, procurement processes, and this is the product that came out on top.
Yeah, that's a really helpful answer, Debbie. I guess when I sort of step back and think of it from a learning perspective, you know, we might have done well to do a bit more around what could go wrong in the implementation phase, because clearly there was a bit of a Vesuvius that resulted instantaneously, which then required a lot of scrambling around in order to actually embed it and make it work in a way that was a good outcome for our patients.
Yeah, I don't think it was envisaged that quite how significant the difference in product was. I mean, when Ellie talks about, joggers that fit a lot of people compared to tailored trousers, that's a good explanation. And it's not that the products don't work or the products there isn't the right range of products for people. It's just it's very much more specific to need. And so and I think it would be very fair to say that I'm not sure that was I think that was underestimated, just how much more bespoke, if you like, and how much more critical things like measurement, fluid intake would be with this transfer of product. I think that's a very fair thing to say. And then poor Ellie came in to this kind of in the middle of it, and has then put in place everything that we've done to actually make for a much, I think, stronger and better service moving forward in terms of the reviews and how things are done. You know, when you've used the same product for, let's say, 20 plus years, people are really familiar with it. The patients were really familiar with it. Nobody likes to have a change, do they? We do like status quo. So I think there was a combination of people, the products were okay, but they weren't as happy with the products that they were now getting, and the making sure the fit was right. So it definitely was a much bigger impact than any of us, I think, had appreciated and realised.
Thanks so much, Aileen. Then we'll move on.
Yeah, mine's just a quick one, just to pick up on something that Debbie just said then. So I think what you said was that we were hoping that actually by going to this new product, we might be able to actually give more people access to this service. Is that what you said? No. Okay.
No,
right.
sorry.
I misunderstood what you said.
I was saying it's a service that is growing in demand as people live longer, as people with and what we wanted to ensure that we were providing a product that worked, was okay, but also was not the most, what
Yeah.
that we could manage our budget effectively to make sure we continue to be able to provide everybody who needed a product, meeting growing demand with, cost efficiency effectively, Aileen.
Yeah, and so we've achieved that, you believe, or we are achieving that. Good, excellent. Okay, thank you. Nothing, Martin.
Thank you very much, Aileen. Ellie, well, thank you very much for excellent presentations, very clear and informative, and some great work you're doing in this transition. And I wish you all the best on your team. Please pass our thanks to your team for all they're doing. It's great.
Thank you very much.
We'll let you go now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.
Okay. Can we move on then to freedom to speak up? I'm not sure that Debbie's going to introduce us, or Mike straight off.
Mike straight off with the
Right.
the first
Sure.
one.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. I'll take sort of most of my paper as read and just sort of highlight a few areas and take any questions. So in terms of the data, number of cases raised, pretty consistent over the last couple of years, slight rise this last financial year compared to last year. Partly that is due to the fact that National Guardian's Office have changed the requirements in terms of cases, and we're now looking at, advice. The advice I give is counted as a case because at some stage in the future that individual might raise a concern directly. As ever, during the period, a couple of hotspots within the organisation where people come collectively to me, and therefore some of the stats show outliers. One example would be students as a professional group. We have very few students within the organisation. Few of them came to me with an issue around training and future jobs within the organisation, and that essentially was something around communication, so very easily sorted. A wide range of referral sources, so a lot more referrals from Wellbeing Matters service. So whenever somebody goes to that service, and if there's a suspicion that the reason they're going there is maybe work related, they will refer on to me for a conversation with that individual and see where we can take that. Most of the cases around behaviours between colleagues, potentially poor management, poor communication. So a high percentage of cases around involving bullying and harassment or any other sort of inappropriate behaviour. If we do get something relating to patient safety, that is automatically raised to Debbie and the patient safety team on receipt of any types of concerns there. We monitor progress via our there are 8 questions within the National Staff Survey, and that's part of our strategy to monitor progress there. And you can see that we are scoring significantly higher than a lot of colleagues in other organisations. So certainly nationally, we've gone from 9th best score around raising concerns to 3rd nationally with the highest increase in score, and within the South East, within our trust type, etc., we are doing very, very well indeed. And that is reflected within the National Education and Training Survey results as well. very good scores there. I suppose the one thing that is a bit concerning is around turnover. So within the paper, I put statistics for turnover of staff that come to see me. And although that has gone down year on year for the last 4 years, it is still significantly higher than the trust average. And I suppose it's very difficult to determine why that is. I might speculate that because it's a lot of these concerns are around behaviours, that whatever intervention is put in when somebody raises a concern, it may be too late to repair that relationship, and might entail somebody leaving the organisation. Difficult to determine. Other than that, really, I suppose the main ask to the board is, although we are doing well in terms of staff feeling enabled to raise concerns, and that these will, their perception that they will be looked into by the organisation and dealt with is high, there is still, I suppose, that the pressure needs to be kept on around making sure we have the right culture within the organisation to improve on that and not let people's experience deteriorate or our scores worsen. And being a curious board and willing to learn, you've always been very supportive around that culture piece, and I suppose the main ask today is that continues with a pace over the next year or so. Martin, I didn't really have much to add on the paperwork, on the paper. I'm very happy to answer questions.
Mike, thank you very much. Very informative report as always. And you may be reassured that for the board, it's probably the ability of staff to feel free to speak up is the most important thing the board has to worry about. Because if we don't have that engagement with staff where they can raise issues safely, then all sorts of things can be hidden, and when they're hidden, problems usually arise. So absolutely, I can say now you've got the board's complete support in what you're doing. It's extremely reassuring that we're getting these very high reported levels of sort of satisfaction, as it were, with our freedom to speak up. And of course, we can't relax, and it's not one of these things you can relax. But I'll let my colleagues ask the questions because I'm talking too much. Mark.
Thank you, Martin. It's not so much a question as a point that you were reinforcing yourself there, Martin. Mike and myself had our regular meeting prior to the board last week. And in terms of his action, which is one that appears at the end of his paper each time to us for us to support and be seen to be actively supporting freedom to speak up, we are at a period, as we've mentioned before, of transition for the board with 2 new members of the executive, 2 new members of the non-executive team coming on over the coming weeks. And it really is critical that as we do, whether they're 15-step visits, board to ward type visits, etc., that we're seen to be actively supporting this, because it really does underpin that transparent, open, participative style of leadership that is so critical to underpinning the culture of the organisation. At a period of change like this, I think that if we all take that on board and are seen to be actively supporting it, it really will ensure that we maintain those scores where Mike has reported them to us today.
Mark, thanks very much for your wise advice. Thank you. Sally.
Mike, thanks for the report. And you appear to have a high level of visibility across the trust. But a lot of visibility now is online, isn't it? We do a lot of things online, and you join the meetings online. Do you feel that you have the same amount of approaches from staff, perhaps who don't have access to computers? And I'm thinking of, say, estate staff or or domestic staff, whether you feel that they are approaching you perhaps or have the opportunity to approach you in the same way as other staff who have got, you know, regular access to IT.
So thanks, Sally. I think that has always been acknowledged as a potential issue, and I think that part of the benefit of having champions around the trust is that we can embed people in those areas that can raise awareness. Perhaps less easy for me to do so. But yes, I'm always sort of concentrating on, you know, who are we hearing from and why? Is that a good thing, or is it not? Whether it's staff networks or whatever staff group, it's always work in progress.
And do you feel you hear from them in a sort of proportion of their size, or?
I think there's always work to do.
Right.
But I do whatever I can and encourage others to support in making sure we hear their voice.
Right, thank you.
Debbie.
Sally, just to add to that, we do have the ability to look down at a very low level from a staff survey, so we can actually see if we've got a service that we're not hearing from and they are saying that they don't really understand how to raise a concern or wouldn't feel confident. They're the very services that we would be making sure we did get out and see from a visibility perspective, because we do have some services that we don't hear from, but when you look at the staff survey, they have extremely above our organisational level of saying that they understand what they would do if they had a concern and they understand how they would raise it. So it's triangulating the information rather than just looking at it in freedom to speak up in isolation, which helps us to target where we put our visible efforts, if you like.
Thanks, Debbie.
Okay, Colin.
Yeah, I guess what I was going to add into that is it's not just about the fact that we're getting very high scores in terms of engagement. It's even about the subgroups. So we do have a few subgroups where actually they may not even, whilst the engagement scores are quite high, they may be slightly lower than the trust average. So it's those areas that we're targeting. And I know that Mike and I are doing some work with some groups of staff on that.
Okay, Naomi.
Yeah, Mike, this might be a tricky one, but it's just, I'm curious about potential blind spots for us. So we may, for example, have a community of international nurses who are relatively new to the trust, using English as a second language and so on and so forth. And therefore there'll be some natural, in inverted commas, barriers to them feeling able, let alone comfortable, to access your good self. Any thoughts? It might be that Deborah, you want to wade in as well.
So I would speak to those groups directly, hopefully via their local induction or whatever. There would be other communications around just leaflets or whatever that would go out to them. I would be talking to their support network, as in the peer support that they would get from within the organisation, to make sure that message is there, that I am there if they feel enabled. Sometimes there are cultural barriers, as with other groups, that they feel that they can't speak up. But as I was saying to Sally, you know, there's always an ongoing work stream around that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Naomi. Debbie.
Naomi, the other thing we do is we do think quite consciously about who are champions. So we ensure that we've got a diversity mix of champions, and Mike taps into the networks a lot, as well as, and actually we have had international nurses raise stuff with Mike. So so I know that we do, but we do try, and it's really multifaceted. There isn't a one thing that you can do that helps with this. It's lots and lots of different things around visibility, champions, diversity, networks, looking at our data to actually make sure we're visible to the whole organisation. But it's an ongoing piece of work.
Thanks so much, Paul.
Mike, I'm just thinking about someone mentioned estates. A lot of our estate, the staff aren't ours. They're employed through NHS PS, they're employed through our PFI contractors. Do we do any work with them around exposure to raising concerns? Because obviously they're in a unique position as being on site and effectively acting as almost as our employees, but aren't actually our employees.
So my understanding, Paul, is that NHS Property Services have their own guardian, so they would have the ability to raise concerns through that route. But also, I am very happy to listen to people who may be sort of working with PFIs or whatever, because the root cause may be something that the organisation can support them with. So I think, yeah, they have their own guardian, but I'm very happy to speak to them as well.
Thank you very much, Paul. That's a good point, because Mike, as you're well aware, that whenever there's a sort of a separation between organisations or between groups, it's often where, you know, the lack of a common approach falls down and then problems arise. So I know you've got this under your control, but I think we've got to keep, as you say, looking for those groups that might be missed out, that might not have been included in the top level data. Although the data is getting better, isn't it, in terms of the resolution we have of the breakdown in the organisation. Look, Mike, thank you very much. I know you do a great job, and I know the staff really appreciate your time with them. It's sort of the results so far look great, but we're all agreed that we need to keep looking at this as an important issue.
Pressure on.
And so thank you. And if there's any particular ask of the board, apart from the general one, which we certainly support your recommendations, don't hesitate to come to the board and ask.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Martin.
Thank you, Mike. Debbie, I think you've now got a thing about improvement programme.
Yeah, our self-assessment action plan that we developed and was signed off by the board last March, and it's just an update on where we were. The outstanding things are around being clear around detriment. The National Guardian's Office were producing something for that, which was released not so long ago, a few weeks ago, and Mike is just looking at that, and we'll use that for any campaign and publicity we need internally. And around proactive encouragement to raise concerns is obviously an ongoing piece of work, and casework review, which Jane and People Directorate will be doing, and there's an internal audit going to be taking place on that within this quarter. We've achieved all the other actions, so it's just here for noting and sight, really. And we'll be round the loop again towards the end of this calendar year with the self-assessment already.
Okay, all right. Thanks so much. Any comments or questions for Debbie? No, thanks so much indeed, Debbie. Okay, patient experience quarterly report, item 6.2. Over to you again, Debbie.
Yeah, so this is our quarterly report. I suppose the things to note here are we have continued through this year to see a lower level of formal complaints and a higher level of complaints that are able to be resolved locally, which I think is really positive. We have continued to see an increase in our numbers of patient feedback that are received monthly, although we were aiming for 10% and we haven't quite got there. We were around about 3% this time last year, and the April figures for this year were 8.5%. So we're getting close to that 10%, which is really, really good. Other than that, we have got in this report, as requested last time, a bit of information around other means that we gather mental health inpatient feedback, and part of the culture of care programme that we're going through. It's a 2-year programme, and continue to see more and more services able to provide us with some positive actions and improvement actions that have been taken as a result of patient experience feedback that they receive. Other than that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Debbie. Any questions? Sally.
Debbie, I noticed the comments around the relatively low scores around mental health inpatients, and the line around the culture of care programme is perhaps, and this is putting it crudely, is the solution. But that's a huge programme, isn't it, with all these strands? I just wondered if there's anything sort of in my simple mind, sort of bit more sort of, well, we could do this and improve. Do you follow me, or am I being over simple?
I know what you're saying, but Sally, you know as well as I do, culture. If you could change culture by doing one simple thing and sustain it, then I'd be a rich woman and I wouldn't need to be sitting here. I'd be out doing consultancy work. So the whole idea about the culture of care programme is that it's multifaceted. It's looking from a anti-racism and diversity lens. It's looking from an environmental lens, and it's looking from a patient and staff culture lens. And it's all of those, and it's about leadership and learning and patient involvement and co-production, and it's all of those things that actually the programme is designed to bring together to actually look at enhancing the culture for staff and patients on the wards. So yes, it is complicated. It is it's a significant programme of work nationally.
Yes.
And yes, Teresa and Julian are going to answer that question better than I just have.
The board, bear with me. I was thinking of something like, please talk to everybody, every day, something like that. But I take what you're saying, Debbie.
Thanks so much, Sally. Julian.
Sorry, get myself off mute. Yeah, one of the things it might be helpful to do, Debbie, because clearly the environments in which you're asking for satisfaction are completely different. Going enthusiastically, voluntarily to a clinic versus being detained under the Mental Health Act, in the psychiatric is a different challenge, both for the patients and members of staff. There's a number of organisations that use the same system as we do, and are quite similar in nature, like Northamptonshire, and it'd be quite interesting to see where they sort of benchmark, the mental health inpatients versus their community services, for example, just to give the board some kind of indicator that actually we're, this is probably also a symptom of the kind of the nature of the service that we're kind of providing. Not to suggest you shouldn't do anything about it, because I know that's not the case, but at least it does place it in some context, because I would imagine if it's going to be more difficult to get the levels of satisfaction in a psychiatric intensive care unit as it is in an outpatient clinic. Can we do that? Will we be able to perhaps have a look to see if there is a reasonable benchmark around that at some point for future?
Yeah, I mean, there is the culture of those two graphs in the culture of care that show that satisfaction, which actually mirrors our I Want Great Care. Should be nationally available. They're setting up Tableau dashboards now, so we should be able to look from a culture of care perspective at those two sets of scores, both for staff and for patients.
Thank you. Cheers.
Teresa.
And linked with that, Debbie, isn't it? We have our regular coaching around culture of care. And actually there's a lot of discussion around the work that we're doing locally and how that they're taking that away and informing the work of the culture of care programme. So again, not to say there shouldn't be opportunity to improve, but there's a lot that we're doing that our coaches are taking and sharing elsewhere. And the other bit is through the provider collaborative. We're doing some benchmarking against a significant number of metrics with Oxford Health and Surrey and Borders. So patient satisfaction is one of those, but also looking at our other performance metrics linked to sort of use of seclusion, other restrictive interventions, self-harm incidents as well. So there's a lot of work going on in that space.
Thanks so much, Teresa. Okay, well, Debs, as usual, a full report, and it's good to see some, some positive improvements in the numbers of staff reporting, but not staff, patients reporting. So that's really helpful. I guess it's a sort of continuing journey, isn't it, on this? But it's good to see all the data there. And my observation is a bit like one on the freedom to speak up, that it's one thing to get an average of the sort of the numbers of patient responses, etc. What you sort of worry about really are the people who aren't surveyed, if you know what I mean. Are they missed out, or are they just content? And I know that's an easy thing to say, but I know you've got it in your slides. Okay, thank you very much. So we'll move on to 6.3, Tolu, quality account report.
Okay. So this is the quality account report for 2024-25. I'm taking the report as read.
Yeah.
Key things to draw out is the fact that we've met all our 6 mandated access targets for 24-25 and are continuing to work on improving waiting times for our patients. The other element just to flag up is really the fact that we only met our self-harm incidence targets in 3 out of the 12 months in 24-25. Clearly, this is an area that is very important to us. We recognize that a lot of patients who self-harm do it on multiple occasions, and this is an area that we're working, the team is working very hard with patients, looking at safety planning, but also trying to understand how people communicate distress, which is really what some of this is about. So I'll ask the board to approve the quality accounts unless there are any questions.
Any questions first, Tolu? Mark.
Not so much a question, but this report came in front of me the day after the governors' meeting that we had last week, where a couple of the governors who are newly appointed asked for a more detailed induction programme and insight into the organisation, because they're struggling a little bit in terms of the breadth and complexity of the organisation. And I sat here having read this, what is a really comprehensive and first-class report, and I think you have to be congratulated, Tolu, in terms of the quality of it. And it was a request really for Julie to ensure that all newly appointed governors are provided with access to this, because it really does provide an excellent oversight of our entire operation. I think it would probably answer a lot of the questions that the governors were asking last week.
Mark, I totally agree with that. I always found a really interesting report. So thank you. Any other comments? We're happy to approve. Tolu, thank you very much indeed for that.
Thank you.
Safe staffing report, Debbie?
Yeah, this is our usual 6 monthly report. There was just some positives I wanted to talk about this time, actually. So for our mental health wards, that every 6 months I come and say, we're still struggling a little bit. We've got some really good news stories. So whilst our vacancy is still around 20% for registered staff, it was 30%, so it's going in the right direction. Our shifts with less than 2 registered this time last year was 7.5% of our shifts, and it's just under 3% of our shifts now, which is also a significant improvement. And our turnover on our mental health wards, well, all of our mental health wards bar Sorrel, is well below our trust average at the moment. It's sitting somewhere between 4 and 7% for our wards. Sorrel ward is slightly higher at 14%, but So that's all, I think, really positive and good news stories actually for our safe staffing on our mental health wards. Otherwise, there isn't anything in particular I wanted to draw your attention to. I am declaring that we have been safely staffed over the last 6 months, and other than reducing our beds on our acute mental health wards from 22 to 18, which the board are fully aware of, there are nothing significant changing wise that's going to impact on safe staffing over the coming 6 months.
Thank you. Aileen.
Just given the discrepancy on Sorrel Ward, is it worth just talking about that a little bit more? I mean, it's the intensive care, isn't it, unit? Am I right? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's what it was when I looked at it for the latest figures, Aileen. So, you know, when you have a relatively small number of staff, you don't need many to leave to like impact the figure. So, I mean, it tends to be a ward where people either love it and stay for a long period of time, or do it for a period of time for experience and then decide that maybe it's not for them. It's the same in an acute trust on a intensive care ward. So I haven't got there isn't a one answer as to why at the moment that is slightly higher. But when you're talking about 30 staff, you don't need many. You don't need many to alter the figure. I guess what I was just reflecting when I was bringing that up really was that actually, if we looked at a year 18 months ago, our turnover across all of our mental health wards was significantly higher, and actually the stability and all that's going on, it is really helping to reduce that turnover, which is meaning that we are in a position where we've got many less shifts with less than 2 registered, etc.
Yeah, which is brilliant. So everywhere else has kind of improved, and this kind of understandably in the circumstances of the services it provides. Okay, all right then. Yeah,
and it's still better. It's still a better turnover than I've seen in at some points. Even on Sorrel Ward.
All right then, thank you.
Thank you, Aileen. Anything else? Debbie, thank you very much indeed. So we'll now move on, if you may, to the executive report. Julian, take it as read.
Just a couple of things. This time, one thing really. There's a bit on there. I do it every year, but this year it's more significant. I think it's significant for the here and now, and I think it's highly significant for the future, and that's the public attitude survey. I think a couple of things, Martin. This is pretty existential, really. So if you look at when the NHS between now and going back to 1983 was at a low point, it was the back end of the John Major, early Blair years before the investment, when we had waiting lists of 18 months and all the rest of it. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? But satisfaction was double the rate it currently is at. So the levels of dissatisfaction with the NHS are off the scale. And I think that is a real problem. And if we get behind some of that, I think there is some work for us to do kind of in terms of strategy. But in terms of the kind of coming year or two, we've got a 10-year plan that the government are going to put together, but we know it's a 3-year and a 7-year plan. And it's pretty obvious, isn't it, from this and everything else where the focus is going to be. In terms of the next couple of years, A&E weights, elective weights, primary care and dentistry, because they are by far the biggest cause of dissatisfaction. So they are going to be absolutely front and centre in terms of kind of government policy. And then I would say for us, Mark.
You've got on mute, Julian.
Don't know how that happened. For us, Martin, I think in the future, and particularly given our strategy day coming up in October, there is a really clear message as a generalisation here, which is when people get into services, generally they're pretty satisfied. It's the mucking around beforehand. So the weights and the process of waiting and the navigation of waiting that is a real issue that is causing dissatisfaction. And of course, there's the age issue as well. And so younger people are really fed up with it. And the way in which we access services. So there's a couple of things really. Our flow and weight, we cover off a little bit in quality accounts, and we cover off in the annual report how we've made some improvements with our weights. But that's particularly in relation to services perhaps where we've got safety concerns. In the future, I think in terms of looking at the flow through services, we need to be really mindful that actually we're not offering a gold standard for those people once they're in, but actually forgetting about people who, no sites. So how we get clinicians and teams sighted on that kind of weight and what's going on in that will be really key. And how long people stay in services is going to be really important for us. Really clear message about the weight and the navigating the weights as opposed to coming into services. I think it's really clear. Couldn't be clearer, really. It's worth a read, but it's writ large. So that gives us a real focus on what we need to be doing with our own services, Martin, I think.
Thank you for that, Julian. How much of that is within our control and how much is about joining up with our partners and colleagues outside the trust?
Well, it's both, isn't it? But there's a heck of a lot we can do. I mean, it's always easier, isn't it, to take the wood out of your own eye?
Absolutely.
Have we got good flow? Are people staying on caseloads optimum amount of time? Is it easy to get in and out of our service? Answer no. We've done some work around the kind of one team around that. But if you look at the dissatisfaction, say, for example, Martin, with the younger people, the definition of that maybe it's sort of under 35s. The expectation around the kind of digital offer and how people are accessing their other services, taking that almost for granted and then being completely dumbfounded by the way things are going. So I do think there's some really things we can do, and of course there are things we can do as a system and all the rest of it, but there's a heck of a lot we could just get on with. Really clear message. And there's a cultural issue, I think, Martin. I would say that services generally do not get too exercised about weights where there's not a quality concern, but the people paying for the service and all the rest of it are completely fed up with that approach.
I understood. Very, very wise advice, Julian. Well, that will be for next year. The strategy days, you say, we've got coming up. And it's sort of when we've got all the change in the NHS as well going on, which you've alluded to. So I think there's always a slight danger here, isn't there, with all the change going on around, that as an organisation you can lose focus and worry about all these things rather than, as you say, your metaphor about taking the wood out of your eyes. I think we just need to focus on being really good at what we do and continue to improve. Wise advice. Thank you, Julian. Any questions for Julian? No? Okay. Thank you for that. Staff survey results. Jane, welcome.
Thank you very much. And again, I'm taking the paper as read and happy to answer any major questions. But I think, again, it's a paper that the Trust should be really proud of. I think that the board here needs to be very proud of. We have, reached a rounded figure, 7.5 for our engagement score, which is, we like to think, the best in the area, because those that are better than us either have a very, very small group of staff or hardly any of their staff replied to the survey, where we had a large number of our staff replying, so around 64%. I won't go through each of the different slides because I'm sure you've had a chance to have a look at that and read that in a number of different forums. But here, and happy to answer any other questions about that. But a really positive score, a set of scores, and very happy that some of the work that we've been doing continues to bear fruit, particularly around things like well-being, with the investment that we've made in there, and the fact that people still want to work here and are recommending us as a place to work and as a place for treatment as well.
Jane, thank you very much. Invite questions from the board, comments. Jane, this is just a really impressive set of results, and it's not just a one-off, is it? It's continuing trend of getting used to these. I suppose if I'm going to try and find something to ask in detail, it's the one I keep going back to, which is, although we got quite a high number, 66% or something of respondents to the survey, there's still 34% who are not. Are those 34% just sort of okay with it and don't have much to feeling about it? Or are there hidden there areas, groups of staff that are really unhappy, we don't feel able to, don't feel it's going to make any difference and therefore don't do it? So we know it's this problem of finding those groups which are not responding and therefore we're not measuring.
Yeah, and that is always our risk, Martin. That really is, which is why that when I say that we think we've done very well compared to those trusts that have much lower response rates. We know there are certain groups, and we will, one of the things that we need to do is to target those groups that we know have lower response rates. We've had some lower response rates. Tolu and I have talked about medics, for example. Some of our students don't respond as much, although we do have separate sets of results from students because we do have the NET survey, which, we've got, relative, again, a smaller number reply, but we're getting relatively positive responses there. So yeah, we continue to try and encourage, and one of the things that we do take heart from is actually, although the percentage is lower, more staff did reply this year. It's just that the overall number of staff we've got in the trust has risen.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then the group that we want to really have, to look at is the response rates for our disabled staff, because we can see a significant difference between disabled staff and their experience and our other staff. But look, lovely to see that the gap is closing for our ethnically diverse staff. There we're getting better and better results each time. And actually, if we look in detail in terms of overall motivation, they seem to be happy and content around the work environment. There are other things that they don't like, but they do seem to be genuinely positive about their work in other ways.
And their engagement scores are high, aren't they?
Yeah, that's right. They're really very high. Yeah.
Okay.
But they are, still suffering more discrimination in the workplace. And again, we can't ignore that. So the work that we're doing in the anti-racism space will continue, and we will continue to be committed to that. We're continuing to look at the neurodiversity work to support our neurodivergent staff, who are often the staff that are overlooked from a disability perspective. But we have already engaged with our Purple Network to start to think about what can we do to find out more about what is happening for our disabled staff and why we've got that gap in experience.
Thank you very much, Jane. If there are no other questions, thank you very much to you and your colleagues, and onwards and upwards.
Well, I thank you, and I always say you couldn't do it unless we have a board that really believes in this work and is committed and supporting this work. It comes from the top, it really does. So it's a thank you to all of you who support this work.
Jane, thank you, and you can reassure we're not going to change. The board's still going to be continuing on this. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, the pay gaps then, which is
so apologies, we've got 3 papers for pay gap, which can get quite detailed. I'm hoping that Ash is going to join us in case you've got any technical questions as well. What we have tried to do with these papers here is to give you a little bit more background and understanding as to why we might have gaps or not have gaps, and also to look at this through an intersectional lens. So whilst we've got 3 separate papers, one on ethnicity, one on gender, and one on disability, we are trying to look at intersectionality. Again, to put this into context, I will say that we have been one of the leaders in developing 3 reports. Up until very recently, there was only a requirement to provide a gender pay gap report, but we proactively have added in ethnicity and disability, and I again have to say thank you to Ash, who has led on that. And because of that, we have been asked to go to and act as an advisor to Cabinet Office about introducing this nationally as a requirement nationally, to produce these reports. Brief summary on ethnicity. Our white staff earn more than our ethnic diverse staff. We do think there may be an age component with that. We do know that our white staff tend to be older, and that will reflect the ethnicity that you have in the general population. So diverse staff are tending to be concentrated in lower graded roles, but they also tend to be younger in the trust as a whole. If you look at national demographics, I think under 25, that sort of 18 to 25, make up 31% of the population, whereas about half of the population, so around 16% when you get to the 56 to 65 age group. So, it will be interesting to see as that demographic moves through what is happening. And we continue to look at progression, as I say, through our anti-racism lens, and we do have our 8C and above reflection points when we appoint someone who is not ethnic diverse, to understand, that there hasn't been any discrimination, intended or unintended, in those appointment processes. Gender. We have a significantly higher number of women in the organisation than on average in the population or in the workplace. And again, our gender figures are largely skewed by the fact that more men work full time and more men are working longer. So we do know that more men are working past pension age and earn the highest hourly rates. Again, our pay structure in the NHS is very much based on length of tenure. And as I say, the pay reports are looking at actual pay, not as pay as a proportion. And disability. Reality is we haven't got statistically significant difference in pay, if you're from between our disabled and non-disabled staff. So depending on whether you take mean or median, our mean staff difference in pay is actually positive towards disabled staff, 0.13. But if you take median, it's in favour of non-disabled staff of 0.49%. I mean, reality is that's insignificant mathematically. So yeah, that's a very short summary of what we've got there. Any technical questions, I'll try my best to answer.
I think these pay gap things need some thought, don't they? They're not easy to understand the statistics. I think it's. But anyway, thank you very much for doing it, and it's really important we do them, and we do them for those three groups as we decided and you've been doing. So thank you to you and Ash. Any questions? Sorry, Jane.
Yeah, and I just have to say it's a huge thanks to both Ash and to Stephen, who's done quite a lot of work with Ash, looking into the background data to perhaps provide a bit more information around what's happening rather than just reporting on what's happening.
Thank you. In which case, Jane, thank you very much indeed for that. Great results. Health and Wellbeing Update Report.
Yeah, and I'll give you a change from my voice. I've got Steph coming in to talk to you about the health and wellbeing reports.
Steph, welcome.
Thanks, Martin. Yeah, as always, take it as read, but I just thought I'd pull out a couple of key bits. So Wellbeing Matters continues to increase the demand on the service, but also the outcome data is really positive coming out of Wellbeing Matters, which is fantastic to see. We're really hoping to go live with our data record system in July, which will then give us a better ability to scrutinise that data as well by things like ethnicity, etc. So we'll be able to reach more into that once we go live. We have made a decision to stop the funding of PEPI at the end of the contract in October, just due to the finances, but we're going to be communicating that out in the next couple of weeks and asking staff for their ideas about how we can fill the gap. I've spoken to the charity. There might be, we might be able to put in a bit of funding bid for something to fill that gap. And we're also going to build a big signposting, warehouse, we're a resource library that we can point people towards. We've gone live with our Wellbeing at Work sessions, which have gone down really, really well. We had another one yesterday that had over 150 attendees. So they're regularly getting over 100 attendees at every one, and really good engagement and good feedback. So we're continuing to develop that. We should be delivering between minimum of 3 a month, but sort of 3 to 5 a month, which is, and then looking at different topics that came out with the review. And then just the last thing that I thought I'd raise that will be big for us for the next month, and then hopefully big if we're successful, is the NHS Charities Together grant that we'll be going for. So at the moment it's gone out to the organisation asking for ideas. We're also looking back at all of the wellbeing review data that we collected and all of the feedback. So we'll have a number of different ideas from both the organisation and using the data. We'll then decide on one to take forward and put submission grant, and then we'll find out in, I think it's August, whether or not we're successful in that. So that could be then a longer term project if we are successful. But yeah, doing a lot of organisational engagement in that to get ideas and yeah, make sure it meets needs. So those are the things I just thought I'd highlight after the report, but happy for any questions as well.
Yeah, thanks so much. Any questions from colleagues? Sally.
Steph, I was interested. It's page 79, and it's around it's called the emotional impact of patient care and managing cognitive overwhelm. And I was thinking of some of the discussion, you probably weren't here, we had previously around, it was around sorrow ward actually, and I'm not focusing on sorrow ward, Debbie, it's all right. But the issue of working with particular patient groups where people are witnessing high levels of distress, which can actually be quite overwhelming. And I'm thinking particularly in, say, mental health, our inpatient mental health, or perhaps when you're working with people at the end of life, and I wondered if any of this was focused around particular patient groups where I think there are well recognised challenges.
Yeah, so those particular workshops are the general workshops that go out. They're always, we know the issues with getting this sort of stuff out to the front line. So they are all recorded and, communicated out that way as well. What I will say is we are focusing on, so we've got wellbeing skills training that Wellbeing Matters are just rolling out. And following a conversation at SPG, we're doing one of those courses specifically for Prospect Park. So we've had really good engagement with the leadership there. And I think they've said they're going to have up to 20 on the first couple of cohorts of that. So whilst it might not be that particularly, there is work going on within Prospect Park and other groups as well, identifying those bits and seeing what we can do differently. We also have a staff support facilitator that sits primarily in Prospect Park, but also in other areas, called Godfrey, who is a lot more present. So he will just go in and see the wards and say, hi, how's it going? That's a post-incident bit. So yeah, there's lots of work going on for those particular groups, not necessarily from those bits that you picked up there.
No.
But that format is then always able to be delivered into those spaces if it was felt helpful.
Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you.
No problem.
Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Steph. As ever, there's a really comprehensive and wide-ranging number of activities you and the team are undertaking, which is encouraging to see. I saw that one of the future actions for the coming 6 months is a review of the wellbeing champions and the role that they perform within the organisation. And the thought occurred to me, do you ever undertake joint meetings between your wellbeing champions and Mike's Freedom to Speak Up champions? Because I can see that they're both performing a very important role across the organisation. And I just wonder, is there cross-fertilisation and sharing of experience and approach between those two groups?
So I can't remember if it happened or not, but it's definitely been discussed in the past to have an in-person meeting actually between those two groups, and we do link in with Mike directly. But as part of that champion review, we're going to look at I think links with freedom to speak up, but also with the mental health first aiders as well, because all of them have that similar roles out in teams. So yeah, we can definitely make sure that that is part of it as well.
Great, thank you.
Debbie, did you want to come in then?
So I'll put it in the chat to say we did have some joint meetings, absolutely recognising that. So yeah, there is because although there are different cohort, there is quite a lot of overlap, Mark, and actually we've talked about the fact that whilst the Freedom Speak Up champions are doing that role and the wellbeing are doing that, you know, they need to understand each other's roles, because they might need to provide that advice and support on either way. So we've certainly had some, and it was post-COVID, so in the last year or so, a couple of meetings. It's hard to get people together face to face, is what we discovered, into one location. So hopefully this review will look at how we can do that a little bit differently.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed then, Steph. All the very best. Recruitment and retention update, Jane?
So this is a report that we sent to FIP, and FIP thought it would be of interest to the wider board. So apologies for those of you who have seen this report before. Again, I'm not going to take too long of your time. Really a few key points to pull out. The workforce has been growing in the trust. It's all planned growth, primarily through planned services that we have acquired. So our workforce is now rapidly approaching 5,500, but that hasn't, and you can see that there's differences in the growth profile. What I will emphasise, given the background of what's been talked about in the NHS, is that central services has not grown, massively beyond, where it is. In fact, it's in some ways, it's percentage-wise, it's slightly smaller. Our turnover for March, hot off the press, is now at 11.08%, so basically 11%. And I think our turnover is likely to continue to slow, given the backdrop of where we are with financial squeeze in the NHS. So I always laugh with Alex because he gave us a stretch target to get to 10%, which is where we which is the national NHS target for turnover. We might actually make it, I think, in the next 12 months, but we shall keep a watch on that one. Again, our largest reason for leavers, two main reasons. It's people who are retiring and relocating, and we do need to understand perhaps the relocation piece a little bit more. In terms of recruitment, we've, as you know, done a lot of work to improve our recruitment and our recruitment standards, and I'm really pleased to report that our candidate satisfaction has remained at 100% now for about 5 months, and our manager feedback is averaging between 80 to 90%, so around 85%. Just to compare that, we're doing some scaling work over in Bob. They're looking at recruitment services across Bob. And across Bob, bearing in mind we are included in those figures, the average candidate satisfaction is 45% and the average line manager satisfaction is 50%. The main reason, by the way, for managers' dissatisfaction is to do with our track system, which is not like it at all, but is one of the few recruitment systems that actually links into ESR, and it's why we use it. A little bit of a shout out here on the social media and the talent attraction team. That was a team which we invested in. And the idea is that they support hard to fill roles. We do get fantastic feedback from that team, which is, shown fairly recently. We've been struggling to get some recruitment to recruit into 2 procurement roles, and the team have supported them. And I got a lovely email only last week saying how helpful that had been, and that they'd finally managed to procure. That sounds strange to say procure 2 procurement people, but they have managed to procure 2 candidates. We continue to, however, monitor our recruitment team and the needs of that the organisation has. And just as recruitment is going down, we have plans to release 2 fixed-term staff that we will not need this year, in line with some of our financial targets. So yeah, we continue to monitor that, is what I'm saying.
Thank you, Jane. Any comments or questions? Okay, thanks so much. Very clear report, by the way. Thank you.
Again, Stephen, who I think is sitting in here, he prepared that, and that's his style. He's developed that style of report, which I think we ought to be using a bit more of in our area for some of our longer reports. So, for example, the pay gap reports, we'll look to put them in that format next year. Excellent.
Thanks so much indeed. Now, because of my old age, I've forgotten to do 7.4 violence reduction. So could we just go back to item 7.4, reducing and preventing, managing violence and aggression? Debbie.
That's okay, Martin. It probably flowed with Jane doing all hers anyway, to be honest with you. So this is our 6-monthly report for the board on activities being undertaken to progress our violence prevention and reduction standards, sexual safety and domestic violence charters. I'm hoping that the highlight report I've done is self-explanatory, pulling out the key activities over the last 6 months. But Ash, who actually leads on this work operationally, so to speak, has stayed on so he can answer any queries or questions, and obviously happy to take any questions.
Any questions? No, it sounds as though it's all clear. Debbie, thanks. Oh, sorry, Sally.
Debbie, do we report somewhere where we prosecute people? Because we've got a no tolerance, haven't we?
Teresa's going to come in on that one, because we will know how many refer to the police and the outcome, but we don't. If you're meaning, do we report it into any reports?
We don't do that.
I'm not sure that we do. Not to the board or through non-clinical. It would come through risk and safety management, I would think.
The only reason I ask that is sometimes I think it's an important message for staff, isn't it, that, you know, we will, if people have got capacity, we will prosecute.
I agree.
Yeah, Sally, we do have a criminal justice panel now, which meet monthly with representatives from the police, from our AMP service, from the hospital, and community teams as needed. So we flag particular incidents and we monitor progress through police investigations in that meeting. So we could certainly ask them to do a summary report from the last year, if that would be helpful for people to see, because they will have the data in terms of referrals and those that have made it to a prosecution.
Well, I think it's personally, I think it's an important message for staff, and that perhaps the board would have an overview with that.
So perhaps we can just think about how it might fit into the reporting in a natural way. That'd be helpful. Okay. Thanks very much. We're now on 7.8, finance report. Paul.
Thanks, Martin. I'll take the report as read, but obviously this is the end of the year report for 24-25, so I'll just go through some of the highlights in terms of some of the numbers over the course of the year. So obviously, hugely challenging year for NHS as a whole. I think fair to say it looks like we buck trend in terms of performance, and I think that's probably down to sound planning and a good set of financial controls and financial management of the organisation. We've closed the year with a £4.9 million surplus, which is in line with the forecast that we've been reporting over the past 2 quarters and is £3 million better than we originally envisaged for the year. In terms of just headlines around workforce, which obviously the biggest driver of cost for the organisation, we've managed to come in within the pay budget, just under by 300,000. I think the I&E table in the report reflects a slightly different figure. There's a year-end adjustment of 18.1 that's run through the books that's in relation to centrally funded pension costs, for which we have to account in March. So there's 18.1 million of additional pay costs and 18.1 million additional funding in there. So that 300,000 underspend is after taking account of that. As Jane's alluded to, we've done really well in terms of recruitment as an organisation over the past year. We're up by 238 contracted whole-time equivalents in terms of permanent staffing, which is an increase of 5%. At the same time, we've managed to reduce bank spend by 7% and reduce agency by 4%, so reductions of 1.7 million and 400,000 in those two areas. Obviously, more stringent targets next year coming around reducing temporary staffing, which we'll continue to monitor. Agency percentage of workforce overall was 2.9%, which was within the 3.2% target set by NHSE. We've continued to see a reduction in price cap breaches, and we've now got a minimal level of off-framework agreements that we use on a regularly, which is around nurseries and dental staff predominantly, where we know they're really difficult posts to fill, and to contract temporary staffing around. Just noting March's performance, obviously end of the financial year, a high number of people taking annual leave. We did see a spike in temporary staffing, which fed through into the work numbers, so increase of 132 in March, and obviously that plays through in terms of our bank spend as well, which if you adjust for working days was 300,000 higher than it was in the previous month. In terms of elective recovery funding, we closed the year with 12.2 in funding overall. Obviously 3 million of it was from prior year 23-24, but even after that, that's 5 million more than we expected in the year. So really strong performance around elective recovery. Placement costs were higher than anticipated in March. The numbers rose again, certainly around PICU placements. And that's one area we will need to be really mindful of moving into the next financial year. We've got a plan set on a specific number, and at the moment we're tracking higher than that. So we'll need to manage that as we move into 25-26. In terms of capital, it was a exceptionally busy month. So we had a number of estates programs that concluded, and IT concluded a number of equipment procurements that they were undertaking. What that means is that we've spent in line with our agreed system allocation of 8.6 million. In addition, we've spent 2.5 million on the PFI estate, and that's, although 2 million less than what we anticipated we would plan to spend. We've made significant progress in terms of our new place of safety and our site-wide bathroom upgrades at PPH, and these will conclude in the coming year. We've also utilised 300,000 of funding from NHSE to eliminate the highest risk ligatures across our community estate as well. So in total, in terms of capital expenditure, we've expended 11.5 million over the year, which I think is really, really good from the teams in terms of managing that level spend and programmes and bringing us in on plan in terms of our system CDAL limit. Really, really good piece of work. And obviously with capital being back-ended towards the end of the year, and with our higher than planned surplus, we've finished the year with a higher cash position as well. So we've closed with a cash position of 54 million, 7.2 million higher than planned moving into next year. I'll leave it there and happy to take any questions.
Well, thank you. Very pleasing set of results. Thank you very much. Any comments? I've just got one, Paul, which is about the bank staff. We still, as you say, we work a fair number of bank hours that we'll help WT, and you've indicated there that there's a sort of a limit to do with the covering for annual leave of other staff. Is that right? You get down to irreducible minimum because you've got to have some bank to cover when people are on leave. Is that where we are at the moment? That limit, or is there more to go? Well, Jane's going to answer the question.
So do you want to come in, Jane? I'll give my view after.
No, you talk first, Paul, and I'll come in.
So I think that the March issue is something that we've seen. We see annually. I think we make best endeavours to do work with the teams around rota compliance and ensuring they try and manage the annual leave as best they can throughout the year. But it is challenging. Jane, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, so Teresa and Tolu know that we both had conversations about this. What's happened is that people are not taking their holiday evenly throughout the year, and then we get a large lump of people trying to rapidly use up their holiday in March. And what we are starting to do is there's a small task and finish group looking particularly at PPH, but I know Tolu has talked about this in relation to medics as well. So the fundamental point is around how do we make sure that we even out those holidays and we don't end up with a big lump in March, when actually that also coincides, or sort of just in that last quarter, which also coincides often when we've got higher rates of sickness absence as well. So yeah, there's a task and finish group looking at that too. So that certainly in Prospect Park and any learning then we can share more widely with others. But looking at holidays, how we even out holidays, how we minimise that sort of lump that we had this year.
Okay, anything else? Thank you. All right. Performance report, Teresa.
Thank you, Martin. So end of year report. So you'll see the scorecard for the full year as well as the highlights. So just take you through from the breakthrough objectives, mindful that some of them are changing now from April onwards. So our restrictive interventions were 351 against the target of 241. And for March, that contributed 69 patients. So an area of focus, we did change the target mid-year, so high numbers of say 69 patients involved in incidents requiring restrictive interventions, but we have seen a reduction in seclusion. So the most restrictive of interventions are clinically ready for discharge, and the number of lost bed days. We've seen an increase actually over the last 5 months against the 250 bed day target for mental health. And we've been doing some targeted work with Reading, who are the top contributor. So of those 360 days, 200 were for Reading residents. And our community wards, we've seen a reduction to 583 lost bed days for March against their target of 500, contributing 116 patients. And their key metric that they're looking at is around packages of care, which was the reason for delay. And then if you look as we move to our new metrics for 25-26, length of stay and occupancy are changes for both mental health and our community hospital wards. We've been red all through the year in terms of occupancy levels and our length of stay, particularly over target in our mental health wards, with 63 in March against a metric really we're aiming for 35, which is the sort of national benchmark. And then there's just the other couple of key points that have been read throughout the year, just so for some assurance, the perinatal access rate has been read, and we've got some targeted work in with the team looking at their overall performance, transformation and their service model. And then talking therapies, they've been read throughout the year around their weights for the second appointment, particularly around weights for face-to-face CBT at step 3. And they've been doing some targeted work with patients to look at alternative models. We're hoping that we'll start to see an improvement through this year. And the rest is, as you've heard throughout the year. Any questions?
Thank you. Any questions? Sally?
Teresa, I know it can vary from month to month, and and that's just the nature of the patient cohort at the particular time. But we've suddenly got a big spurt on physical assaults, haven't we? And do you have any thoughts on that? Is it because we've got particular unwell people in at particular? It's one person, multiple times, or.
So for Roseward contributed 30 of those 85 incidents, and majority of those around a single patient. We've been doing some detailed analysis of her long stay, Sally. She's a top contributor for self-harm incidents. She's a top contributor for restrictive interventions, and a contributor to assaults on staff. And they're often around her level of restraint that's needed. So yeah, it can be an individual patient, Sally, that really sets this target significantly higher, but not something we want to just accept. So really working on the care plan for that individual, using our nurse consultant network to help shape the care plans, and also looking at how we share best practice across providers to see if there's alternative ways of managing. Because
although it wouldn't be a direct correlation, you'd hope if the numbers on the wards were going down, there'd be less assault. So it looked a bit sort of odd in a way. But if you've got somebody like that who's clearly very, very unwell, I can understand how it would account for that sudden rise. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. Anything else? Teresa, thank you very much. Sally, 8.2, anything you want to report back from your... Oh, we've got the wrong things here. It says FIP.
Finance. I chaired the finance committee.
You did. Thank you.
I chaired it.
That confused me. I thought I was going mad.
I think it confused everybody on the finance committee when I chaired it. But fortunately, Paul's more or less given you an overview of what we discussed in terms of his finance paper, and Jane gave you an overview of the recruitment and retention report. Unfortunately for me, and perhaps fortunately for the trust, it was the most straightforward meeting you could possibly chair. We were with the trust meeting all its financial targets.
Excellent. Okay. Well, I think we've covered all that quite well this morning, so thanks very much. Annual health and safety report, Paul?
Yeah, thanks, Martin. I'll take it as read and again just pull out some of the highlights. I think overall, bar a few exceptions, it's a positive report in terms of a number of the indicators look like they're on a downward trend. So just confirmation, no enforcement notices from the Health Service Executive for local authorities this year. RIDDOR incidents, which are obviously the most serious incidents that we need to report in terms of injuries to staff and patients. We had 5 incidents this year, which is a reduction from 11 last year. Those 5 incidents, 2 assaults, 3 slips, trips and falls were reported. Slips, trips and falls generally, we've seen a reduction of 13% on the year. Again, that can be seasonal, can be to do with a harsh winter and ice, etc. So, but positive that it's reducing. Despite the blip in terms of the breakthrough objective around physical assaults, overall physical assaults reported have fallen by 13%. But again, no surprise that 81% of the cases that we are getting reported are on the mental health inpatient wards, and we know there's a significant amount of work, including the breakthrough objectives targets on reducing those cases. Non-physical assaults, we did see an increase, and unfortunately hate crimes, we saw an increase as well, with 50% increase in cases being reported, close to 50% of which had a racial element associated with them. In terms of training, really positive. We've seen increases in statutory fire training compliance and health and safety training, conflict resolution training well above our 90% target at 98%, and all levels of manual handling training again are all well above the 90% target. from a fire perspective, we've had 34 reported incidents in the year, which is the lowest number of incidents we've had in the last 5 years. And we had an audit undertaken by our authorised fire engineer, which concluded overall that the fire risk for the organisation was low, which is positive, and the annual statement of fire safety is attached to the back of the report. And then finally, just to note, slight increase in sickness rates for the year, which has obviously led to a 8% increase in the number of days we've lost to staff sickness. Aside that, I'll take the report as read and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Paul. Any questions? No, very clear. Thanks very much, Paul. Oh, sorry, Naomi.
Thanks, Martin. Just briefly, Paul, on the riddles, 5 incidents in a year. You know, some organisations will ensure that every single RIDDOR is brought to the board's attention, and that might be something that we want to consider. But more importantly, our reaction when a RIDDOR occurs. Can you just enlighten us into what do we do when we've had a RIDDOR? You know, again, some organisations will send out, you know, a one-pager that describes the incident and the learnings from it, because it's then all about prevention.
So each of the RIDDOR incidents reported through DATIX and are reported up into our non-clinical risk committee, where we review them. And obviously, I think if there was anything there in terms of significant learning, it would be brought up through that committee. I think if you look at the incidents that we've got, unfortunately, some of them are, like I say, slips, trips and falls. They are incidents where, you know, staff have tripped on a curb, for example, out, you know, while they're on a community visit. So there's a level of learning that we can take, but some of them are unfortunately accidents. So I think we're quite rigorous in terms of how we review them. I think we're fortunate that we've not seen any that are down to, I would say, significant lapses that we need to take significant action over.
That's reassuring. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Naomi. Okay, let's move on to the annual report. Julian.
Thanks, Martin. Can we take it as read, an opportunity for colleagues who've, well, I mean, it's good. I mean, getting the quality account and annual report gives you a good view of kind of what's gone on in the organisation. You try and capture most things. Thank you, Martin, for your introduction, which is in both names, but you've penned it. And should we just pause to see if people have spotted something, sometimes, you know, an error that's significant, you want us to get it out before it goes to Parliament, or an omission that you think is glaring that we ought to include, really.
Any response? Very good. Thank you very much, Julian. I think we are content. Thank you. So the Governor's update, just a few things. One, of course, the nominations committee of the Governors has been busy recruiting a new non-executive director. Sonia is now, I hope, observing us. Was successful. It was a good process, well run, and the Governors were very diligent in their activity on that. I just wanted to note how committed the Governors are to reviewing the quality account sort of information. You know, their quality subcommittee, they really take it very seriously and have good discussions, which I think is really valuable. So I just wanted to bring that to the board's attention. Okay, audit committee.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. So the April audit committee, I think the two main items that we don't have every quarter on the audit committee was the anti-crime annual report and the internal audit annual report. Both were no concerns. The internal audit from RSM gave us a level 2 opinion, which is in line with last year and in line with most of the reports that they issue. So nothing else to call out, really.
Any comments, questions? Okay, any other business? Well, I've got an item of any other business. This is Naomi's last public board meeting, and it would be remiss of me not to say a few words. Naomi, you've been with us quite a few years now, and I remember meeting you the very first time in another place. And you've been an outstanding non-executive director. You've been an outstanding chair of the Finance Committee, and you've been a wonderful colleague. And I think all of us will miss you greatly, both your intellect, your determination to get to the bottom of things, and the gentle way in which you always raise those difficult questions. So thank you very much sincerely for that. And I know we'll have a chance at another occasion to say farewell more fully, but it's really, we're going to miss you. But I know Sonia will pick up the baton, I'm sure, and run with it. So, but Naomi, thanks so much indeed.
Oh, the thanks comes straight back at you. Truly, I am going to miss you all tremendously. It would be just too hard for me to express just what a valuable experience this has had for me personally. And you know, the development of me as an individual, I've grown in spades in the last 7.5 years, thanks to the work that you've that's been in front of us. And I absolutely know in spades that Sonia is going to be really smashing this out of the park. So a very, very warm welcome to you, Sonia.
Naomi, thanks so much indeed. Okay, if there's any other business, our next board meeting is the 8th of July. Oh, Rebecca. Oh yes, Rebecca just has some nice words on the chat, which is good. It's the 8th of July. And now we'll consider the resolution to exclude the press and public from the remainder of the meeting. So I think